What do zombies, utopias, and doomsday preppers have in common? More than you'd think. The dead walk, society collapses, and someone is always eating beans out of a can. But beneath the gore and chaos lies something deeper, an unsettling mirror reflecting who we are when the rules fall away. Because the apocalypse isn't just fantasy, it's rehearsal. And the real question isn't how you'd survive, but who you'd become. This is Too Complicated for History. Welcome to Too Complicated for History. I am your host, Isaac S. Loftus, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Dr. Lynn Robbins.
Hey, everyone.
We come to you twice a month to bring you the history that has fallen through the cracks of your curriculum, and today we have an episode that is a little bit out of the ordinary. Dare I say brainless? Or wanting brains? Lynn, what are we talking about today?
Well, today we're very happy to have Dr. Kelly J. Baker. She is an essayist, historian, religious studies, and popular culture scholar, and also a journalist. And we're going to talk about her book called The Zombies Are Coming, The Realities of the Zombie Apocalypse in American Culture. Thanks so much for being here with us today, Kelly.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Yay. So, can you tell us a little bit about how you came to zombies? Because I know we all come to our, research topics in different ways. And this is a very cool one. And so is this something like you loved zombies when you were a kid and so you just had to study them, or where'd this come from?
Yeah, no, it was totally not a love of zombies. I always tell people that it was not like that I was a fan at all. I actually came to zombies through my students. I taught this very, very cool class called Apocalypses at the University of Tennessee. And I can't remember, the title was better than that. I was cooler 11 years ago. But I always taught this class, and students were great about like researching and analyzing other apocalypses. And I threw zombies in there thinking like, oh, this is something that we can do, right? It's something that's in the culture. We can pay attention to it. And when we got to it, they couldn't analyze them. They were like, no, they're fun. Don't take our fun away, right? Like, don't do this to us. And so I wanted to kind of know what that impulse was. Like, what was it about zombies that meant that they couldn't do analysis, right? Like, why didn't they want to push against the boundaries of that? And so I was like, let me go down this rabbit hole and see what happens. And what happened is I wrote a book accidentally.
Why does this keep happening to our guests? You're the second person in 1 month to come back this month that we talked to that was like, yeah, and I accidentally wrote a book. That has never happened to me before.
I know, right? Where's my accidental book? Darn it. We're doing the wrong things, I guess. No.
Yeah, but that's really, really cool. 11 years ago, that was like peak Walking Dead,
right?
TV at the time,
yes,
right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so when they said that they, man, I want to get to the specifics of the questions that we outlined, but when they were saying that they're fun, don't take our fun away. What were you making them do in that? What
I was trying to do is get them to like think about like the ethics of the apocalypse, right? Like get down into it. Like there are guns in the zombie apocalypse, right? And like we're destroying zombies without thinking this through, right? And thinking what bodies we're destroying. We're not thinking about like what's happening to humans in the zombie apocalypse, right? And this survival at all cost ethic. We're not thinking about like how the world ends there. And they didn't want to like answer those questions for me because they wanted to play, right? Like they wanted to pretend like the world was ending and what kind of hero would they be, kind of thing instead. And I ruined it for them. Instead, by asking these kinds of questions about to just kind of think through the violence of it and to think through the racism and to think through the misogyny and all these other pieces that they just didn't want to consider, but they had no problem considering in the other apocalypses we studied, right? Like they could do it in those, but when it came to like the video games that they played or the Walking Dead, they just wanted to consume that and they didn't want to like pardon the pun, but they didn't want to turn their brains on, right? In the same kind of way.
That's so interesting because, this is, I will give, this is a brief tidbit into my history where I used to be a screenwriter and have made a zombie movie in the past. I will send a free book to anyone who can post a screenshot of me in that film on Blue Sky. That's a real challenge. I will send a free book to anyone who can do that if you can find it. I'm not going to tell you what the movie's called. That's interesting because from people who create this kind of work in the public culture, you think a lot about that stuff. Like they are a representative thing, right? You're thinking about, because they are just this fantasy, ghoul, and you're sort of thinking about how they fit into a story and what they mean. It's interesting to hear that your students were just not engaging at that level, and that how pretentious as I was 12 years ago didn't matter at all, and people just wanted to see the zombies get knocked over or whatever.
Right.
And they must be seeing themselves as they're always the hero. They're not seeing themselves as the victim, because if you see yourselves as a victim having your brain eaten, I assume it's not as fun.
Yeah, I did this exercise with them where I made them stand up, and then we went through and we're like, what kind of survival skills do you have? Right. Because all of them wanted to be the hero. And I was like, how many of you own a 4-wheel drive? Right. And if you don't sit down, right. Like how many of you are actually marksmen? Right. Sit down. Right. Like how many of you could render pig fat into gasoline if you had to, right? And so the idea is my comments got wilder and wilder as it went along, and so by the end of it, there's only one random kid standing who maybe has those skills or maybe just thinks that they have those skills, right? But it was just to show them how far out the possibility would be that any of us would still be standing, because I was usually out first round, and that's what I would tell them. I had no belief at all that I was going to survive very long in a zombie apocalypse. And I was okay with that, actually. The zombie apocalypse didn't sound fun to me. I was not here for it in any way, shape, or form. But, just that they kind of conjured themselves as the Rick Grimes, right? Walking Dead style, that they were going to make it through and they were going to be the head of this band of survivors. And I was like, really?
Yeah, no one wants to think of themselves as Carl.
Right.
Whatever, in that scenario, but you're the child. You'll probably be the little one that needs to be taken care of.
Right.
So a quick just a factual question. Well, not factual. A quick question about zombies, their story. Now, if you're I'm confusing them with vampires. Do you become a zombie if a zombie gets you?
So if a zombie bites you, usually in these scenarios, you become a zombie, right?
Okay.
Is how this works. Yeah.
Okay.
So similar to vampires,
right?
In a same way, yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a great transition into something that I was curious about, because they are often an allegory for disease.
Yes,
and that's an interesting, because that they are it is transmissible in close contact and stuff. So as far as this interacting with American culture and stuff like that, well, how did your book get in? So since you weren't a zombie fan before, I'm assuming you weren't here's the meaning of Night of the Living Dead and all the different, because that exists. But what excited you, or what was surprising when you dove into that side of things, how people were doing and what it does represent?
Yeah. So I really came into this thinking about it as a scholar of religion. And so what I was focused on was thinking about this as an apocalypse in particular, right? So, because zombies can be anything, right? I mean, that's what's so great about them, is that they can be a vector of disease. They can be about consumption, right? Thinking about Romero in the 1970s, right? That they can be all kinds of things. And so I came in thinking about them very particularly as monsters that bring about the end of the world.
Sure.
And so for me, it was thinking about what is it about this monster that's so tied to these doomsday scenarios? Why aren't we talking about werewolves and the end of the world? And we have some of that stuff, but it's just not overwhelming, right? Why aren't we talking about vampires in this way? Why aren't there other monsters? Mermaids. Why aren't there mermaids in the end of the world, right? So why is it, right? Why not, in some kind of way? So what is it about zombies that are just so tied to this? And I think it's because they can be attached to disease, right? And this sort of transmissibility. And they just are so much agents of chaos, right? In a way that other monsters could be, but just aren't represented in such a way. And they just are so like empty slates in a lot of ways too. Zombies are, that we can just put so much on them and let them work their way through our culture and let them do this. And so for me, it was like, once I started looking at them, I was like, oh my gosh, like they're always like doing this. Like they're always causing the end, right?
Yeah.
And so as a religious studies person, I was like, let's think about like why they do that, right? And like what this tells us about America in some kind of way, right? Like that we not only are seeing them do this, like the creators are doing this with them, right? But that we're also consuming this in such a way, right? Like there was that period, like in the 2010s, like leading somewhat into the 2020s, where like zombies were everywhere, right? There's just like this moment where you like, every time you turn around, there was like some other kind of zombie media that you could consume so easily. And I just thought that they were just never going to be over. Where I was like, what is it about this, right? That people are so into? And why do we want to see them destroy us over and over again? You know?
Sure. Is it because, did you find anything significant about the fact, so like a werewolf is like a, you know, looks like a wolf, right? A vampire even just has some like defining traits, but the only thing that a zombie is a decayed person.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like they are a person. Is there any significance to like they're like mindless people almost? Like you could take it to even represent not be just a disease, but not to use this particular phrase because it's used a lot in online circles, but like a mental disease even. Like they're just like they're people that are not acting rationally by their base, like operating by their base instinct. Was that a significant differentiator between it and them and the other monsters?
Yeah, I think that lack of consciousness really matters there, right? And the impulse driven, like maybe they're just motivated by their id in some way, right? Has something to do with this, and how scary that is, right? Like that you remove that rationale, and then all that's left when you do that with humans is this sort of base like violence in some kind of way, right? And how scary that is. I don't think it's like a coincidence that like Black Friday mobs are represented as like zombies, you know, in some kind of way, like that we have memes like that appear, not so much lately because of online shopping and this sort of thing, right? This is an earlier incarnation, probably dates myself, but like, you know, that there was this moment where you would see these like images and people would be like, oh my God, they're like zombies, right?
People are going to the hospital.
They were, right?
Every Thanksgiving.
They just lose their minds.
For the Gen Z out there, like people were literally like arming themselves.
Yeah, like, you know, people are catching elbows and like, you know, like this is a serious like event at Best Buy, right? Or Walmart. Yeah, like this is a phenomenon that was like intense, right? That, and it fits with the consumerism model of zombies too, right? Very much there. Yeah.
So in your book, you talk about when you were young that you liked to read horror stories, and you definitely listed authors that I read too. So I liked scary stories, you know, horror stories too. And you talk about the genre and what you call its moralism, which I thought was absolutely fascinating. And so can you talk about that and what that means?
Yeah. No, so I think it's not a coincidence that I landed on like a horror topic to write about, because I was sort of primed for this in a kind of way, which you're pointing to. And I think that there's this like moralism in horror that is inherently conservative. And I don't mean this politically, right? I mean like small c conservative in a certain way. And I mean this too, that it understands the world in a way that is really sharply demarcated between good and evil. And that there is no nuance here, right? That things are either good or they're bad, and that you're on one side of the line or you're on the other. And there's something about this kind of stark moralism that appealed to a younger Kelly, right? Luckily, I would say that 40-something Kelly is very much past that, thank goodness. But there was something about like understanding the world that there were no shades of gray, right? That you were either with the good guys or you were with the bad guys. And that's sort of how it played out. But horror also gave a sense to me as a really anxious kid that like shit could go wrong. Can I say that?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All right. That shit could go wrong like at any moment, that the world was inherently fragile, and that the order that we understood was like a very thin fabric over the chaos that existed. Right.
Right.
And so that at any moment that chaos could erupt and that danger could be there. So not only was that kind of like simplistic moralism like running through it, but it also had that sense of like the dangerousness of the world was always like beating at our door, right? And I think that we get that really clearly in these zombie apocalypse stories too, right? That fabric of order is so fragile, and all it takes, right, is one zombie bite and it's over, right? And then society is gone. The running joke in my household is like, society's gone and then there are no spoons, right? Like in this, like these zombie tales, suddenly like the world has disappeared and you can't find a spoon. Everybody is like fighting with a can, and there are no can openers and there are no spoons. And we're like, how did this happen? Did the zombies
beans
take
off a
these?
knife?
Yeah. Like, did the zombies take them? Like, not only are they after brains, but they also collect the spoons as they come by.
They
like,
use spoons to eat the brains, maybe?
Yeah, maybe so. But, like.
That is a fantastically mundane insight. That is. How did that thin layer of sort of, you talked about the horror genre being this, having this small c conservatism and this thin layer of sort of lack of order. How does that compare to historical apocalypses that you explore and real life examples of like does that layer of order wear thin in places and then breaks down? I think I've said on the podcast before, maybe it's just in private conversation, given a lot of feelings that people have about the state of the world currently, but like the world's ended hundreds of times before.
It does.
And it will again. And but so as far as how your analysis of zombie apocalypses, how do they compare to historical apocalypses?
No, I think that's a great question. And I think that we can look at fictional apocalypses and see that like the orderliness that we hope like exists in real life is always remarkably fragile, right? And I think that when we look at like historical apocalyptic movements, that they're also hoping for that world that doesn't have that shade of gray, right? Like they're hoping for that like stark moralism, right? That you're on the side of the elect, right? And that you're the ones that are going to be successful and you're going to have that utopia, right? And everyone else is not going to have that option,
Sure.
And that they're like pushing towards that in some kind of way. And that is a hope for like order amongst the chaos and like moving forward, and those are those lovely like utopian movements that are never really utopian movements because there are always those elements that are like dystopian, like interwoven amongst them. But I think it also shows like how much people are trying to like create order amongst like all the different like strands and like multiplicity of ordinary life, right?
Sure.
Where it's just so complex that it's hard to like manage. And I feel like with apocalyptic movements, they're really trying to smooth out the edges, right? And trying to like make it as uncomplicated as possible by like setting up these like bifurcations, right? Like good and evil, right? Us and them, right? Like setting this up in some kind of way.
Sure.
And it's really interesting to me to see that play out like in political language, for example.
Us versus them, good versus evil.
Good versus evil, like to sort of just manage some of the chaotic.
I did use the term mind virus earlier, which is very commonly used currently.
Right.
Online now.
Anyway. So it's fascinating to me when that happens, right? And what drops out when you do that, right? And for me too, and this is part of the book, like a strand that's interwoven through the book is like the inherent danger of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like what happens when we lose that complexity, that nuance, like what happens when we identify people in this way, right? Like when we set up those bifurcations and like try to understand that there's always an enemy like within in some kind of approach that we have to the world. Yeah. So that like early like moralism that I was like, I'm on board. Now I'm like, this is terrifying, right? In a different way.
What I'm thinking about when you're talking about the zombie apocalypse is it makes you feel like, by simplifying it, that you have more control, that there's bad or good, and that therefore you know what to do with the bad and you know what to do with the good. And so you feel safer and in control, when that's never the case.
Right.
In reality.
Like, yeah. We wish we had some kind of control like that, and it just doesn't work.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting that it just runs counter to a base reality, that it's just a fact, and how tempting it is.
Yes.
Right. How like delightfully delicious it would be for it to have that kind of certainty or confidence in you know, your actions and
to know you're doing the right thing.
And is it in exploring these, I'm not sure how like how wide your breadth of exploration was as far as zombie apocalypse. So like is there any exploration of that in that journey? I know in some zombie cultural stories they talk about like people, or they have people move from, you know, uncertain to, you know, buying in to that moralism. I know in Walking Dead does it. Is that reflective of, you know, historical things, like where people start on one side of things and actually that temptation
takes over.
And creeps them into a place that's totally insane, and they probably didn't even realize that movement happening.
Yeah, I didn't do too much with like people that were shifting like from like a more uncertain moment to like certainty. Most of the folks that I look at in The Zombies Are Coming are the folks that are already like on the certainty train, right? You know, like they are already like convinced that they need to prep for doomsday, right? Like they have not been uncertain in this journey. Like they know that this is what they need to do, right? That they are convinced by the position that they have in some kind of way. I think it would have been like more interesting if I had found folks that were more on the fence, you know, in this, in some kind of way, and then sort of moved along in this journey differently. But I didn't have folks that were more wobbly. They were just like there for it, right? Yeah,
there's one. I'm forgetting the specifics of it, but there's like one Anabaptist apocalyptic movement from, I think from like Denmark or Scandinavia or something like that, from like the 14 or 1500s, and then like holed up in a town, and eventually the leader is convinced of his own immortality, so like he goes to face the army by himself and gets run through by a spear, and then that's the end of it. Right. But like he gets to the point where like he is convinced, like that's what I meant, like the travel to like a place that's totally insane. Like of the story that they're telling themselves within this place, right? They've totally like those are the horde, we are this chosen, and exactly what you were talking about, to the point where he was just believing things that are totally gone.
Well, you know, it's interesting. One of the things that I talk about in the book is these particularly like zombie doomsday preppers who are part of this documentary. And one of the things that like really surprised me, and I tend to think that I can't be surprised by a lot of things, but one of the things that surprised me is how real the zombie apocalypse was as like a potential like actual event for them. Right? Like
that's interesting.
How they like evaluated it, not as like if this happens, but when this happens, like we are prepared for this. Like we have the guns, and we are talking about like what will actually happen if one of our relatives turns into a zombie? Like, how willing are we to like shoot someone in the face, right? And we're going to have this conversation on camera. And I had this moment where I was like, I have to pause this because like, I'm not sure what to do with it, right? Like, as a scholar, like what's happening in front of me where I'm like, what do you mean when? Like when? win? Are you for real?
Right.
And I had to have this moment where I was like, actually, they do mean win, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this isn't an if scenario. Like, they are in it for real, where they believe that this is a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And like, now I am on a journey with them that is very different than the journey that I thought I was going to be on for this process, because they understand it to be real in a way that I don't understand it as a real potentiality, right? Like, it's just the space of belief is different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Between them and me, right? And so it was kind of a jarring moment where I was just like, whoa, now we're talking about like killing folks in an interesting like fashion, and you know, like, I'm not here for it, right?
Right.
Can't imagine a situation sitting around a dinner table and be like, if you see the bite mark, gonna have to do it.
You're gonna have to, and that's
gonna
exactly
have to shoot me in the head. Like, that's
right.
a crazy thing.
Don't let me get away with it.
I'm gonna have that conversation with my son tomorrow.
No, I mean, it was wild. Yeah, no, it was absolutely like a wild moment where I was just like, did I see this? I did.
Right. You have to
I'm gonna rewind it.
Sure. Yeah.
Rewind is when you go backwards, for people that aren't familiar.
For the youngins.
Right? Like, for those that are younger than me.
You double click on the left side of the YouTube clip,
right.
And it goes back 15 seconds. Yes. That's what happens. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was just one of these moments where I was like, oh, like, we are inhabiting realities that are different, right? In this moment. And like, how do I like evaluate that as a scholar?
One of the things that really stuck out to me in your book was when you said, I think it was maybe 2013, but was it the CDC actually was encouraging people to prepare for the zombie apocalypse because it was a way for them to prepare for a
natural
real
disaster
scenario. Yeah. So it's like, well, if people aren't going to prepare for hurricanes or all of these things, we'll just tell them to prepare for the zombie apocalypse, but give them the same suggestions we would for these actual things that will happen, kind of thing. That just kind of blew me away that the government did that.
Yeah. No, it kind of blew me away too, like, right? What? Like, I mean, it tells you, like, one, how popular zombies were, that they thought that they could motivate folks this way.
Right.
And two, like, how bad are we at disaster preparedness?
Pretty bad.
We need,
apparently,
like,
we don't care.
We are really bad, obviously, that we need like some sort of fantasy to participate in, right? Like, to get us motivated to do like hurricane prep, right? In some kind of way.
Yeah.
I
just thought that was wild.
Yeah.
Is just I think going back a little bit to where we were somewhere before. So you were talking about how thin the layer of order is on top of the chaos. So when, as far as like the moralism goes, when and even in your sort of watching of the doomsday preppers or the zombie apocalypse preppers, what part of a moral framework goes? Like how does it, like, when is, like, what is a luxury morality to have, and then once everything is gone, where do we end up?
Right. No, that's an excellent question. And I think where we end up is like, killing is no longer bad.
Sure.
Right. Is like one of the things that instantly becomes a luxury. And I think that was one of the ones that was most disturbing to me, is that, like, not only do you have to kill zombies, right, which is one step, but it's also that you have to kill other humans to survive, right? That's a part of the zombie apocalypse narrative that's so clear. Because other humans are inherently dangerous. People can't see the scare quotes on the podcast, but they're there. Other humans are inherently dangerous to you. And so you have to, like, act out against them, right? And you have to be proactive about this, right? And this is so much a part of, like, the doomsday prep, is, like, not only what you're prepping for is monsters, but you're prepping for other humans too, because you have to protect what you have in some kind of way, and you have to protect yourself. And it's very much a, like, shoot first gun culture that emerges in this, in a really, like, nefarious way. And yeah, so I mean, it was one of the things that bothered me the most about this, is that becomes a thing that, like, is just assumed, and why would you have a problem with it? Right. Is sort of the thread that comes through that.
Is that a fantasy? Or is that something that, like, when we actually see, like, that version of sort of, like, moral degeneration to every man, you know, survival of the fittest, is that what actually, like, plays out historically, like, when stuff, you know, hits the fan?
I mean, so that's the part that I think is like useful to think about, which is I don't know that that's actually a luxury, right? I think that that's what we see is when we have encounters between human beings, that these are not like pleasant encounters. And I think that's why the apocalyptic framework is so important to think about, is that when it does appear in the historical record and these encounters occur, that they're violent and conflict ridden encounters, right? They're not like peaceful like moments, right? And they're not encouraging peaceful moments. And so I think that it's just that it becomes like abundantly clear in these like fictional accounts in a way that you can kind of notice more than maybe you can instantly going to the historical record and having to kind of look through a little bit more. Does that make sense? Like that you just have to dig in more to see like what the rhetoric is, how we're using it, how we're thinking it through. Yeah.
Yeah, it's you know, I thinking about like life itself is like a luxury.
Yeah,
it's an interesting thought, but it does ring true. Because I don't want to get into the specifics of them because some of them are like pretty horrific and stuff. But yeah, I you know in thinking about historical instances where it is life or death, you know, migrant people, whatever, people make pretty devastating decisions that I can't imagine making. And like I can't even fathom what it's like. But then when you know when presented with a fictional story, I'd be like, yeah, of course I'll, you know.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, you great. I'll run that zombie over with my car. Fine. Whatever.
Yeah, right.
We gotta get out.
Well, you know, it's interesting. We just had a discussion of like the trolley problem in my house with like a teenager and a tweenager, right? Where they're like trying to think through this like question, you know, like in an abstract way, and like whether you can think through it in an abstract way or not. And, you know, I have one who's very literal, who's like, can't we just like not kill anyone? Like, can we do this without killing anyone? And, you know, it's like, that's not the way the problem is set up, right? And it's just this kind of interesting like, you know, question about like the value of life, right? And like thinking through this question about the value of life and like the way that problem is set up to like force your hand, you know. But it was led to some really interesting discussions and one like meltdown about like why can't we just save everyone, right? You know, which was very sweet. Yeah, no, I think the point about like just the luxury of even like being able to like have the moment to think that through is a very important point.
Yeah, that's a you have some great discussions in your house.
I know some wild ones. Yeah.
I'll say that just because I'd love to hear more.
So as far as it seems like apocalyptic dystopian future, there's so many of those movies, and I feel like there are more and more of them. I personally don't understand why people love them so much.
Fair enough.
Because it's like the world is already such a mess, and then I'm going to watch a movie for 2.5 hours where, you know, it's the apocalypse and people are just fighting to, you know, there's like 5 people left, and it's like, can I be doing something more useful with my time? No offense. I know a lot of people who love disaster movies, but I personally, you know, to me, it's like, why is this fun for some people? But it seems like the zombies kind of fit into that, what people enjoy. And I mean, do you have any idea? First of all, is this an American phenomenon? And why? What is it why do people want to watch worst case scenarios in their entertainment time? Like, why is this so popular?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I will say I'm an Americanist. So I'm looking at this from an American lens. And I will say that there are zombie films internationally that have gotten like good attention. Like Train to Busan, right, is like a good example. And is a film that I get recommended to me all the time, right? So so there are the appeal of zombies in other places, and zombies appear really different in different places, right? Which is something that I want someone to do something with that's not me, that has
potential dissertation, everyone.
Better tools than I do, right? To do this.
If Jason, if you're listening, do Kingdom on Netflix as a series.
Oh,
please.
yeah.
That show is great.
And so what I will say is this like dystopian appeal is such a fascinating thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing while we're sitting through like disaster movies, right? Like, are we imagining ourselves as the heroes?
Yeah, it's power fantasy.
All on my students, right? Like, are we there with Rick Grimes, right? Like making our way through? Are we the heroes? Do we like it because it's a society that's worse than what we have going on? You know, like, is that part of it in some way?
It's like, well, at least we're not them.
At least we're not them. Like, who knew it could be worse, right?
I can't imagine flipping off a movie like, wow, that really sucked for them.
Right? Like, that's the most terrible example, right? Like, I hope listeners out there that you are not watching it in that way, right? Like, let's just hope that that's not the case. But I do think that part of the appeal is like the like fantasy of imagining that you're the one that's surviving through this, right? Like that you were the one that is like tromping through and that you have saved the day. Right.
Okay.
And I think that that's kind of like the standing like appeal to this is that you're part of that ragtag band of survivors that is going to do this in some kind of way. Right. And at least that's like what happens when I talk to people about this. It's like that's why they dig it in some kind of way. You know, I've watched a lot of these just because I have to watch a lot of them. And, you know, I'm not watching it because like I want to survive. I'm watching it because I like want to know themes, right? Or I want to know like that kind of, you know, approach. Like I want to know who actually is surviving and who dies tragically.
Right.
You know, and who dies the most violently. That's always really instructive in like terrible ways. You know, that kind of thing. But I do think there's that sort of appeal, right? And I do think there's something too about like what kind of society happens, right? Like I do think there's a curiosity there about like after the fall, what are we looking at in some kind of way? And so I do wonder about that part as well. Like, you know, is it that we're always on the run or is it like a chance to build something? Right. And that I wonder about, like, are people watching it to see about the building part too, you know?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and you touched on it a little bit, but definitely you talk about in your book the inherent racism and misogyny of who survives these.
Right.
So who perhaps is more likely or able to imagine themselves as the hero because they're the ones who are appearing in the zombie movies or in the because it's their whatever they fit into their box. And so like what are some of these sort of themes that we have that are like inherently, you know, racist, misogynist, all those.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a good question. So one of the things that I talk about in the book is like, why is it that white people are the ones surviving these the most, right? Like, so there's something going on here that like our heroes and like the saviors oftentimes are most often white people. Right. And so we should think about that and like what's going on here. And that should concern us a little bit that and oftentimes that it's white men, right, who are the ones that are like leading the group, right? Not great. That oftentimes white women are victims in these scenarios. And then we get to like marginalized peoples who are not doing great in these movies and TV shows at all. Part of the reason I stopped watching The Walking Dead is I got tired of them killing off people of color, right? Like I just couldn't handle it anymore, where it was one of these things where I was like, I fall in love with a character. I followed this character's arc. And now this character has made a great sacrifice to save some white character. And I'm like, no, not again. Like, are you for real? You know? And so, and not only like killed off a character, but like killed off a character in like the most gruesome way possible.
You're talking about Glenn?
Yeah. Like, why? You know?
I knew it was. I read the
yeah, you're like,
so
I
knew it was coming.
The comics, so I was not prepared. Yeah, and so those kinds of things are concerning to me. And then one of the things I talk about in the book too are these exploding targets that this particular company made. That the targets are also raced and gendered in ways that are really problematic. And this is me like downplaying it a lot.
Sure.
Yeah. And so that the targets become ways that purchasers can work out their like racialized and gendered fantasies of violence, in these awful ways. And it's clear from like the ways in which customers like comment on these things on the websites that that's what they're doing, right? So it's not like a surprise that this is what's happening, right? It's also one of these things where thank goodness for like screenshots and all these things for when those kind of things come down, you know?
Right.
Like, because the company realized that this was happening and then was like, wait a second, maybe we've gone wrong.
Sure.
You know, whoops. But that kind of thing happens too, right? Like the actual like material artifacts of this was beyond disturbing, right? That this could actually, we can allow people to enact these fantasies in real time, right?
Right.
You know, too.
Gosh.
I do have a Pat, we might need to save this for a Patreon exclusive because the question I'm about to ask is potentially damning from a personal perspective. Now, here's a question: if we wanted to sort of unpack some latent misogyny I may or may not have had while watching Walking Dead,
okay,
why was I so satisfied when Lori died?
Oh no!
Right? Why was so frustrated with her as a character that when she was gone, I was like, oh, thank goodness. Like, was I just young and misogynist in my, a decade ago?
I think they wrote her particularly as like this white feminist character to make her frustrating. Like, I think they did this on purpose.
Okay.
Like, I think that they wanted viewers to be frustrated with her. I think they wanted her to be annoying. I think they wanted her like this. And I think it was a thing where they were like signaling with her.
Gotcha.
I really think it was the case.
And Lynn, for context, since you haven't watched this, this is the wife of the main guy, and they have a son named Carl. And for the first like 2 seasons, Lori's only job is to watch Carl. Yeah. And Carl is constantly getting away and then getting other people killed because of the scenarios that they're having. And eventually, it was like, this isn't Carl's fault. He's a child. This is Lori's fault.
It's Lori's fault, right?
It was kind of where my frame of my mind landed, and then eventually,
watch
she dies.
your kid. Yeah. Okay.
And I was like, hooray. At the time,
I don't know that I was like hooray.
I haven't rewatched it in 11 years.
Right? No, that's a long time.
Hold on. We're getting a note from producer Pat that she does do the cardinal sin of horror movies in that she cheat on Rick.
She does cheat on Rick. Yeah.
So if you know anything about horror movie tropes, you're out.
Yeah. I love that he had to send a note in where he was like, hold on, please.
It's all caps, Shane, in just giant letters.
But I think they did that on purpose. And what's interesting to me is that there was a lot of fan reaction to her that was really negative.
Super negative.
Like, it was super negative. Like, super negative reaction to her and her character, like, the entire time that she was on the show, right? that I think that was like some of that was misogyny, right? Like
Sure.
just like frustration with her character because her character was frustrating. One, but two, I think it was like annoyance over her screen time and her storyline that men had about her. And just like, why are we dealing with this character at all? Right? Like, why are we talking about this lady? You know,
it's even interesting talking about like sort of the societal framework that breaks down, now that I'm thinking about it,
yeah,
that a lot of the things that she's doing or the priorities she has are sort of like on her marriage and her motherhood in a way that felt inappropriate for the scenario. Right. Like it was like, hey, she's taking the old moral framework and dragging too much of it with her in the new world where we need to be, you know, popping heads on a regular basis.
Yeah, no, that she was too wed to like a traditional model.
Yeah.
And that it just didn't work in like the zombie world that she inhabited.
Yeah. That's super interesting. I didn't, now that you're talking about that framework broken down, that she may have been lingering with that. Interesting. But anyway, Pat, if you find that too cancelable, please feel free to take it off.
Too cancelable.
We can put it on the Patreon. But that's so in the this is sort of like a pop culture sort of more recent context thing. Have you seen the winds change in the last 5 years? Just because we've had like a moment where it felt like the world might end to a disease like that. Like, how do you, since you were sort of steeped in this, how was that the you know, pandemic and whatever, however you want to define post-pandemic or like latent pandemic or long tail of pandemic situation that we're currently in, given this context?
I feel like we've gotten less zombies, right? Like I feel like we're just not steeped in them as much as we were, right? Like, because I feel like there was a moment where like everywhere I looked, there they were, right? And I feel like it's kind of tapered off some. But we do have like The Last of Us, right? And I thought that was done particularly well. Though also
fungus zombies.
Lynn. Also heartbreaking. Totally unfair emotional manipulation in that show. But I feel like it's just not the like cultural like huge phenomenon that it once was. And part of me wonders if that's not because of the pandemic, right? And like dealing with the realities of an actual pandemic and living through that, I think makes it a little less palpable.
It's not so fun to imagine
deal
anymore.
with
it's not
zombies.
As much fantasy.
It's not as much fantasy, and it's not as fun, and it just doesn't ring the same. When I was on Historian at the Movies, we watched Dawn of the Dead, the most recent one. And I'm going to be honest with you, it was a little hard to watch it after going through the pandemic, right? It was one of those things where I was like, it's just, you know, it's like, it's a little much, right? To like get through that. And it wasn't the first zombie thing I watched because I did watch The Last of Us, but even that was a little like hard to like walk. Like it was just, and there was like even fungus, right? Like it wasn't the same thing, but it was hard to kind of like sit through in a certain way, right? Like it felt different in my body, like than it did pre-pandemic.
Well, it's funny. I didn't watch those. I didn't watch Last of Us. Haven't watched it yet because my wife doesn't like horror movies or horror shows. Okay. But we did do a pandemic rewatching of Breaking Bad, and I had a visceral different reaction to it.
Oh yeah,
the first time I watched it.
Interesting.
The entire time I was like, he's so mean.
Oh
like,
wow.
Why is he so mean? Like he's so let Jesse go, Walter.
Yeah, seriously.
Let him go, please. Like begging him to do that, which was very different than when I first watched it, which was totally like, oh, how kick-ass this guy's, you know, doing all this drug dealing and look how cool he is.
Yeah.
And during the pandemic, it was I don't like this. He's a bad guy from the outset. So I understand that perspective a little bit. I might have to see if I can get through Last of Us. I know that from the games, not from the television show. But that's a fascinating reality that when things get more real, that the fantasy versions of it become less enjoyable to sort of play in.
Yeah. I don't imagine
Absolutely.
the CDC is going to come up with a campaign using zombies for
anytime soon, right?
For anytime soon, you know.
It's not quite so fun at this point. Yeah.
No.
You do talk about in your book that I think is really important to mention is why we should take people's preparation for the zombie apocalypse, why we should take it seriously. You took it seriously. You didn't see it as like, oh, it's just some fad or for some people like this, but you took it seriously to really look at it as, an aspect in American culture that meant something, that matters. So why would you say that it's important to take, this obsession with zombies seriously?
Right. So I wanted to not be dismissive of these folks, right? Because I think it's easy to be like, you're prepping for zombies, like, okay, right? Like, and just kind of not consider what they were doing a part of American culture, but really like label it as something aside, right? And I wanted to take it seriously because I wanted to think through like, this is a part of American gun culture, right? Like this is a part of American histories of violence, right? Like this is a part of the American like understanding of apocalypticism, which is not actually that out of bounds either. And I really wanted to center them instead of putting them to the side because I thought it would say something about like where we stand ethically about a whole bunch of issues.
Right.
And I thought it would also say something about like maybe our ethics aren't that great. Around a whole bunch of these issues too, right? And so for me it was a way to like think through what happens if we take something that's hyper violent and say, no, this is actually something that is inherently a part of us, right? And historically it is, right? Like it's not that separate from a lot of other things.
Right.
That apocalypticism is actually really mainstream, right? That these things are stuff that is with us and we can't like dismiss it. And that was really important to me to do that, to say like, we can't like just avoid this stuff because there are people that are out here doing this and thinking it through. And just because it's zombies doesn't mean that it's fantasy, right? Because they're preparing with real guns.
Right.
So like, maybe that should make us pay attention to it a little bit more. But it was a way for me to center all those concerns and to really like uplift them as something for us to pay attention to, or at least let it give us pause, right? For a moment and let us hesitate over it as we're thinking about like America in the early it's not even early, in the 2010s, right? Leading into the 2020s.
Right.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I think it's a fantastic way to engage people with that thought, process in a way that like a spoonful of sugar of rotting corpse sugar to help the the ethical framework discussion go down.
Right.
So we're getting close to an hour here, and I just wanted to end with, since you've watched and consumed so much of this media, do you have any like sort of like off the beaten favorites or things that are sort of underappreciated that you think should be that people should check out?
Yeah. So I will give you my favorite zombie movie, which is like, I will say is like a strange one to be a favorite zombie movie, which is Warm Bodies, because it's so like strangely different than a lot of the other zombie media because it ends on a high note.
Oh, nice. Okay. That's good.
So it doesn't end tragically. It actually ends with a happy ending. And that's not giving too much away, but it's based on a book. The book is actually very good too. But yeah, it poses the question of what happens if zombies start to be sentient. And so that's kind of an interesting mode too, right?
That's a fun one.
Yeah. Like, it's a good one. And it's fun. It's lighthearted. I didn't end it being like, I'm really depressed now about the state of the world,
Right.
So, that's good because most of them leave me really bummed about things. So,
Yeah.
Hard to go away with a lesson. And
Yeah.
speaking of that, what can we learn from zombies? And if there's nothing, what can we learn from your book? But I am interested what we can learn from,
what's the takeaway?
The
What's
takeaway
the
of zombies.
takeaway
What
from
can they teach
zombies?
us as
Oh,
humans,
gosh.
or what it means to be a human?
I think we can learn a lot from monsters in general about what not to be as humans. So it's like a negative lesson, right?
Yeah.
So if zombies are violent and they're brainless and they are ruled by their id, then I think we could argue that humans should use our brains more, that we should shy away from violence, that we should maybe re-ruled. I hate the Freudian thing here, so I'm just going to leave that part alone. But that we should just try to not be those mindless monsters, right? That we should be more thoughtful about how we are handling ourselves, that we should work away from the horror that they offer, and that we should be thinking through the ethics of what their films show us and how we land on those if we're consuming them. So yeah, instead of just wanting to be the hero in some sort of zombie fantasy,
it's not black and white. And even if you're the hero, you should think about there were victims, and did they deserve what you did to become the hero? So it adds all those nuances back, essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
See, I like that. Learning from zombies.
Yeah. Who knew?
Who knew?
That was possible. Who knew that there was something to learn? Well, thank you so much, Dr. Baker, for joining us. This is a super fun conversation.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I appreciate y'all having me.
This has been fantastic, and I'm going to ask it because we always ask, and I'll be really excited and surprised if there is one, but we always talk about historic sites, and that wherever you live, there's, a historic site near you.
It's usually relevant to the conversation.
We're going to make it relevant. So maybe there's a site where a big zombie movie was filmed, or let's say I'm obsessed with zombies. Where would you tell me to go? Like, what would you say?
Oh, my goodness. I am totally stumped by this question.
Well, our producer Pat is saying Universal Horror Nights
in October.
Oh, that's,
if you're in Florida or Los Angeles.
That is the best answer ever.
Yeah.
Producer Pat. Yes. Is Halloween Horror Nights at Universal, because they always have tons of zombies, right? Like, because they have to. I don't do it because I am, and this tells you all you need to know about me. I am a huge chicken when it comes to haunted houses and stuff like that, because I would be swinging instead of like handling
you would fight,
it gracefully.
not flight,
I would fight and not flight. Yes. So I can't do it.
But it's a good thing if one of the listeners wants to go out and actually
interact with zombies.
That's where they need to go.
Great. Yeah.
Okay. See, Isaac, we made it work.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
And given that that your response is fight, not flight, maybe you shouldn't be sitting down when you are asking that series of questions to your students. Maybe you're not out in the first round.
Maybe I'm not out in the first round. Maybe second round. Yeah.
Listen, if your response is like fainting goat style, maybe that's first
maybe
round out.
First round.
Yeah. Dr. Baker, thank you so much for joining us. This is great.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was great.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.